Welcome to the latest printed press. I'm Aysen Djemal, and today I will cover what is going on in the UK and around the world. In the UK headlines, it reports that the proportion of young people in England going to university has passed the symbolic 50% mark for the first time. Figures from the Department for Education for 2017 to 18 show 50.2% of people going into higher education. The figures are higher for women, where 57% are going to university. The annual statistics on entry to higher education showed the proportion of people set to go to university before the age of 30. For now, more with business news. As we know, Thomas Cook collapsed in the early hours of Monday morning after its bosses were unable to raise a financial rescue package of over $1 billion or secure a government bailout. More than 9,000 staff across Britain were immediately put out of work, including around 1,000 staff at their head office in Peterborough. Solicitors have said that hundreds of Thomas Cook's staff across the UK could be in line for thousands of pounds of extra pay on top of statutory redundancy following the collapse of the travel company, a leading employment lawyer has revealed. Also in the UK, after a week in court hearings, all MPs have returned to work. They're all engaged in angry exchanges over the government's unlawful decision to suspend Parliament. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is under fire as MPs have urged the Prime Minister to apologise after he said the best way to honour Jo Cox, the MP murdered during the EU referendum campaign, was to get Brexit done. Pressures on Boris Johnson to resign continues, according to a North Wales Live poll. The public were asked if Johnson should go or stay. After the landmark ruling on Monday, more than 14,500 responded, with 68% saying yes and 32% saying no. As Eurogench TV, we headed down to the streets today to see what our local public think about Brexit. Should Johnson stay or should he go? What will the future hold for Britain? Coming up now on the latest printed press.
Okay, and we're here, and I'm asking you, what do you think about Brexit?
Brexit for me, it's a stage. It's like we're not really going to come out of Europe. I just think what they're doing and the way they're presenting it all over the last couple of years, it's just a bit of it's like they're playing charades. It's just like a game, that's all. But we're not coming out. For me, we're not coming out. They've done this all deliberately to make us think we're coming out, and then there's all these problems, and then obviously I don't think the end game is going to be we're staying in Europe. We're not coming out.
Okay, that's your view. And also, what do you think about Boris? Should he stay or should he go?
Boris shouldn't have been in the first place. He's only elected amongst other MPs. He wasn't actually voted in by the public in any way. So, and I think what he's done is being unlawful. I think again he shouldn't be in office in the first place, but he should get kicked out. No doubt about it.
Hello, we're here with Matthew, and we're going to ask the big question. What do you think about Brexit?
I mean, I have many opinions on it. I think that it probably will happen, and I think that it's designed in a way that so that the government can just squeeze the lemons, and it's going to probably bring a new recession or something's going to happen, and everyone's going to have to be out of pocket. And I just personally think that it's a little bit of a farce, and I don't really believe most of what I'm hearing, to be honest, but I don't think Boris should be. I mean, look at the guy. He shouldn't really be running anything. I don't think he could run a bath, to be honest. But I mean, that sort of goes for every politician that I see. Man, a lot of them, they say one thing, and then when it comes to the actual crunch, nothing really delivers. So it seems like people forget that every 4 years, and then the same thing happens over and over again. But I personally think that it's bad news for everyone.
Thank you very much for giving us your opinion. Thank you.
I think Brexit has been presented in a way that people didn't understand the seriousness of it, and unfortunately it's only now. And I think that tells me I think government had a responsibility to communicate that seriousness, and people only realizing now that it's grave is far too late. So I feel that there was gross neglect on their behalf. It should have been communicated from the referendum. So I feel that even the Supreme Court's judgment, the ruling that they've just made, I don't know whether I heard words like null and void and unlawful. I think those words need to be used on the referendum, because the referendum was the foundation of Brexit, and unfortunately there is sufficient evidence to show that the referendum, there was, there's been reports left, right and centre showing that there was criminal activity behind the referendum. Now, we can't say things have got to be done lawful at this late stage when the referendum was done unlawfully. Too much evidence has even circulated, I think, in the past few weeks with regards to Cambridge Analytica and Steve Barron and Boris and even Facebook, even up to this past week. I think there was a document Facebook was stopping from being published. It just got published a week ago, which confirms again the illegalities to the whole process of the referendum. So people can't just look at this deadline. It's a very frightening situation, and I think people should not take it lightly. They have to do their research themselves individually. And I think people just relying on the media, and I just did my own research and I found that the Evening Standard is connected to a friend of Boris who's Russian. He was connected to Putin and the KGB, and I'm shocked just to find out and I'm thinking, well, hold on a minute. Or the Evening Standard is a free newspaper. We read that every day. Everybody kind of assumes it has a neutrality to it. Has there been undue influence over the community, over the public, through that newspaper since the start with referendum? Now, I put it out there that there's conflicts of interest, that at this late stage is not too late to look at. So I think the more you look at Brexit, the more you see criminality, the more it's concerning, the more it's proving to be unlawful for the referendum. Not anything that they're even doing now, because that's coming out of the unlawfulness of the referendum. If the unlawfulness of the referendum had been dealt with, we wouldn't now be dealing with the unlawfulness of Brexit. And that's the problem. The Supreme Court needs to make a decision on the referendum, the illegalities of the referendum. If they fail to do that, then it has not been sufficiently looked at.
So your message to the public is to make their own research. Yeah.
Understand for themselves, clear position. That is, I think, people who obviously had concerns and did vote leave. I believe 50% were incited to discriminate, which in itself is illegal under the Race Relations Act, Equality Act. The law was breached then through incitement, creating an anti-immigrant sentiment and allowing history to repeat itself, which was outlawed a long time ago. But then there's a 50% that maybe they feel they have concerns over the EU. But they would have ended up being in the minority in terms of the outcome of the vote. And even if there's problems with the EU, there is a process to deal with those problems that could have been taken rather than take the route of totally cutting ourselves off from a 40-year marriage and relationship. So we've not been presented the full picture of Brexit. We are walking, the blind are leading the blind. We are all about to fall into a very deep ditch. People are underestimating the fall. They think it's a small fall. It may not be a small fall. It could be a very deep fall that could affect everybody individually as families. Jobs are being lost right now. People are experiencing such huge fluctuation with the rate of the pound and the euro. I even recently spoke to British people who are stuck in France, etc. They said all their savings is being affected, especially the elderly are so vulnerable under these circumstances, especially with their savings. So the elderly in this country and abroad are being directly affected because of this fluctuation. Meanwhile, other people are profiting from this fluctuation. And I beg to ask the question, did Boris know that he was going to fail? But did he have, did people profit from those failures, knowing full well they're going to fail. They're going to fail with these votes, going to fail with closing Parliament. Was that a calculated risk?
So you're saying it was a little bit staged, do you think?
I think there's, going by the volatility it created for the stock market, millions, if not billions, was made. Now we need to know whose pocket that went into, because that's gone at the expense of the British people, that's gone at the expense of democracy, and somebody is making a lot of money here whilst they're talking about ordering body bags, and I don't think there's sufficient due diligence in, they've had sufficient time to prepare for a Brexit. So the question is, not only do we not have a deal, the question is, why don't we have a deal? Why are they not prepared for Brexit? Why is Brexit, the risk of Brexit coming on the 31st could result in food shortages, could result in transport, when you as a Conservative government have been in power? You don't need an election to be in power. You're in power, you've had responsibility to prepare. So the government needs to be held to account that they are not prepared. It's not a question of them trying to put the blame on everybody else. They are to blame for the current situation. An election is not going to resolve that, because they're already in power and have failed to prepare for Brexit. But the trouble with Brexit, we cannot give it a legitimacy because it's illegal. So Labour has to review its position. And once we give it that legitimacy, that's where there's a failure right now with the entire process. Because even if you're going to do Brexit, it should be done legally. And I think for the British people, it wasn't done legally in the onset. There was organised crime behind it. Those criminal implications. The FBI and Mueller investigations have implemented already. Those behind the referendum have been part of the FBI investigations. So they've already been they're suspects in very serious international proceedings. So somehow this is being swept under the carpet, and we're all treating Brexit as though it's legitimate. It is not legitimate. And so we have a serious situation of organised crime that is reached a point whereby we are treating it a white-collared crime as though it's legal.
Yes, well, thank you very much for your opinion today. No, it's been fantastic. This is the word on the street today. Thank you. Okay, and the next question. What do you think about Boris Johnson? Do you think he should stay or go?
Unfortunately, I think there's, again, I believe there's another legal matter with regards that Boris Johnson should not only have gone, but he should have gone a long time ago, because specifically over the Grenfell Tower fire tragedy. Boris Johnson was presented with the opportunity to prevent fire tragedy by the firemen and fire unions, who all told him that if he carried out the cuts of closing fire stations, making firemen lose their jobs, not giving them sufficient funding, they would end up with tragedy, they would end up with more fire deaths that they would not be able to cope and manage with. Now, this was prior to Grenfell Tower. Now, he had opportunity to negotiate with them, just like how we are with Brexit right now. He was in the same position with Grenfell Tower fire. He was warned, he was told the gravity of the risk he was taking with health and safety and with fire. And he, again, did not listen and forced his will on the fire brigade. Now, as a result, when it came to Grenfell Tower fire, there wasn't sufficient firemen, fire engines that were able to get there on time. It was a walking disaster. Now, there is sufficient evidence, the fire brigade have provided sufficient reports that Boris Johnson needs to be held to account. If you look at the fire stations, the number of fire stations have closed. Now, how many high-rise and tower blocks do we have in London? Now, as Mayor of London, he put the whole of London at risk. Now, if he failed, now it's on his advice those cuts were made, and if he has been proven to be wrong as a result of Grenfell Tower fire, and all those people died on Grenfell Tower fire, he is guilty of gross negligence and manslaughter. So to me, the manslaughter charges for Grenfell Tower cannot exclude Boris Johnson. They have to include Boris Johnson. The police said that they are going to allow manslaughter charges. Therefore, Boris Johnson is more than just a suspect in that case. He is needs to be held to account. But it's more frightening because we have a bigger situational responsibility with Brexit. So one just has to look at, if we weren't ready to deal with a single fire, one fire, and that responsibility was in the hands of Boris Johnson, how on earth will we be ready for the whole country to be ready for Brexit? He's been proven incapable before, and he didn't have the capacity to make the right decisions at the right time that involved a matter of death and life. And the fire brigade put technical reports to him, and he rejected and he laughed at exactly the same behaviour he did with the fire brigade, he is doing now with Brexit.
So basically leave and be held accountable.
He has to be held accountable as a major suspect with Grenfell Tower fire. And that inquiry is going on, but it's dragging out. But it should be very clear what Boris' position was with the deaths of all those people. And the gas didn't switch off till nearly 8 a.m. in the morning. Now, that resulted in an incineration situation that so many bodies... So the death toll was far greater, we all know that. But that
tragedy
was wiped away, so that accountability is not there. But at least we have a very concrete case where the fire brigade warned Boris Johnson, do not make those cuts, and he went forward with those cuts, and those cuts directly affected Grenfell Tower fire, and he needs to be held account.
Thank you very much. Hello, Darren.
Hi.
Can we have your opinion about Brexit? What do you think about it?
Certainly. Well, I think, 17 point whatever million people voted for it. I think we just need to get it done, to be honest. It's, it's Parliament frustrating the people's opinion. So I think Parliament needs to be dissolved. We need to have an election, and then I think the new Parliament will vote it through. Just need to let that happen.
Okay, I mean, it sort of leads me to my next question. What do you think about Boris Johnson? Do you think he should stay or go? What's your opinion about that?
I think he should stay. I think, obviously he hasn't necessarily acted perfectly, but at the end of the day, I'm not sure who else would be willing to step into that position at the moment. So I think he should stay, get Brexit done, and then we'll see where we go in a general election.
Okay, thank you very much for your opinions today. Thank you.
Certainly quite a disillusioned public there. From the opinions that we gauge from the street today, it seems to feel that there isn't enough information about Brexit, and not enough was delivered from the government. I mean, there's a lot of mixed opinions about Boris. Some feel that he should stay, he's the man for the job, whereas others feel that certainly he should go. But what's certain is that it's quite an unsecure future for Britain at the moment today on the streets. Now, moving away from the UK, let's see what's going on around the world. Magnitude 5.8 earthquake shakes Turkey's Istanbul today. The earthquake shook buildings and damaged a mosque in Istanbul, sending residents rushing from buildings through. No immediate reports of mass casualties, thank goodness. Turkey's President Erdogan said 8 people had minor injuries and reported that earthquakes also hit Bursa, Tekirdağ and other nearby cities. World leaders have assembled at the 74th UN General Assembly, where they grapple with issues of climate change, trade wars, regional conflicts and a dispute in the Gulf region with wide-stretching impact. Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned the world is facing an unprecedented threat from intolerance, violent extremism and terrorism that affects every country, conflicts and entire regions. The UN chief told a Security Council meeting the new frontier is cyber terrorism, the use of social media and the dark web to coordinate attacks, spread propaganda and recruit new followers. Also on news today, the former French president died, aged 86. He served as president between 1995 and 2007. And now, China opens a new starfish airport, billed as the biggest terminal in the world. The huge airport that spans 1 million square meters cost 13.5 billion and was constructed south of Beijing in just 5 years. It will only serve as an airport. Like many others around the world, it will contain retail, dining and entertainment, as well as interactive pet hotels, childcare facilities and a showroom for companies. Wow, that is some airport. I certainly want to go to that one. Now we come to an end of the latest printed press today. Tune in back tomorrow for another edition of the latest printed press. We'll be bringing you all the latest news as well as talking to some very special guests tomorrow. Thank you. Have a very nice evening.